All right, hang on one second. Roger just texted me. There he is. All right, so with that, I'm going to call the Neary Building Committee meeting to order for Monday, April 1st, 2024. It is currently 7:05 p.m. and we have 6 of our 7 voting members. Chris will be here in about a half an hour. And I see we're joined by a lot of our ex officio members as well, so welcome to all of you. We do have a full agenda tonight. I will try to keep us moving along. And just for full transparency, the communications subcommittee does have a posted meeting at the end of this. So we will adjourn the Neary Building Committee meeting at that point and join on a separate link. It's going to be a very quick meeting, but just we have one action item we need to take care of. So just for those that are involved, I think you're aware of that. And those, anyone who want to be confused as well, that wasn't part of it. So with that being said, we'll go to approval of meeting minutes. We have 3 separate minutes. I'm going to start with February 29, 2024. This was the open forum, and I just basically typed up a summary paragraph to denote the discussion. Obviously, no votes were taken, but because we have a quorum that was present at that meeting, we are required to submit minutes. So, Roger, Mark, and I were there. Chris was also there. So I don't know, Mark or Roger, if you have anything you want to add to that discussion, because I imagine we're going to want to move those sets of meeting minutes separate from the other two. So comments on 229.
Do you want to, are you looking to do that first before the other two?
I am, because I'm anticipating that those that were not there live are going to abstain because there was no recording either.
Move to approve.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? All right, roll call. Mark,
Aye.
Kathy,
Abstain.
Denise,
Abstain.
Andrew,
Wait a minute.
Abstain.
Roger.
Aye.
I am I as well. So it's a 303 vote, if I got it correct. The next are 3-4 of 2024. Any questions or comments on those? And then 325 of 2024 were added midday today. If people haven't had a chance to review those, we can hold the vote on those. I just need to know where people are at on those.
I have not read.
Okay.
I,
Is everyone-
I have not either.
Okay. All right, so let's just do 3-4 then. Does anyone have any objection to doing just 3-4? Okay. I'll move to approve the meeting minutes for 3-4-2024 as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Mark,
Aye.
Kathy,
I,
Denise, Andrew,
Aye.
Roger,
Aye.
and I am I as well. All right. Next is follow-up discussion from the 3/25/2024 building performance presentation. I am going to bring the Arrow Street and OPM team in at this point so that they can answer items as needed. So first thing I thought we'd start with is I know there was a lot of data presented last week. We obviously didn't make any decisions, and I think won't be making any decisions until items get further along, but I wanted to give everyone a chance to ask questions as they saw fit, and then basically formally establish and populate our sustainability subcommittee that will run with this from here on out and make reports back to the full committee. So With that being said, are there any questions from last week or anything people were thinking about since last week related to this? Okay, I'm seeing none on that topic. Then the next item is to approve the charge for the Sustainability Subcommittee and appoint subcommittee members. Because I posted this later than I had envisioned this particular item, and for the sake of clarity, I just figured I could read the 2 lines of the charge in the composition, just to make sure everyone was on the same page. So this subcommittee shall consist of members appointed to the Neary Building Committee to focus on assessing the design as it relates to sustainability, resilience, and wellness. The subcommittee will recommend design options to the full NBC related to HVAC, system selection, lead, chips, scorecard, and other project goals as determined by the subcommittee. The membership shall consist of appointed members to the Neary Building Committee. Membership shall be 3 voting members and 1 non-voting member that is part of the school administration. So are there any questions? I should give full editorial to the Arrow Street team who helped design the charge based on what they were looking for. So are there any questions on the charge itself?
So where did this come from? Is this an MSBA recommended subcommittee, or is this one that, for example, Jim has dealt with before and thinks is needed?
It came from Jim, but I'll let him expand further.
Yeah, it's a typical subcommittee that we have that carries through the design, through construction to just focus on the sustainability items. It's a fairly detailed conversation. So the smaller subcommittee of when there's interested folks, it's just definitely helps the process along. So yeah, not required by MSBA, but I would say standard practice for most projects.
Jim, are there more subcommittees that we should be anticipating?
As when we get closer to detailed design, there will likely be a security subcommittee, an interiors subcommittee, exteriors subcommittee, but those are more when we get closer to detailed design, when we start to make choices about what's going into the building.
Seems like a lot of subcommittees.
It does indeed.
It can, yeah. I mean, those we can discuss when we cross that bridge, but I would say the ones that we have right now will carry us through feasibility. So, and it's obviously up to the group as far as which subcommittees are needed and which aren't. But yeah, that's fairly typical.
And I think what I would say on the flip side to that is the amount of detail that's going to be required for some of these items. I don't know that it's the best use of the number of members that we have on the full committee working through some of those, especially given the various areas of expertise. This one being a classic example of we certainly have people that are talented in this area that could take a much deeper dive than others.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Roger.
More Jason if it was, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Roger.
So we currently have, I may not be using the right word, is it? A financial subcommittee and a communications subcommittee that are in action right now. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So Jason, who are the people in this committee that have these particular talents?
Well, for sure, Chris Evers
I agree with Chris.
on the HVAC.
Yep.
I would imagine Mark Davis certainly has a lot of background there. And then with all due respect to the rest of us, not quite sure, at least from the voting side. So I don't know if it's given that this goes well beyond the engineering aspects, right? Especially there's a lot of talk about wellness. I didn't know if anyone else was interested. We can always pare it back to 2, but that's a very tough number. 3 is a tough number, as we all know, but 2 is even tougher in terms of meeting. So.
With 2, would we still need to post?
Yes.
Yeah,
It's a
have both of
subcommittee.
them there every time. Nobody could miss one.
Yeah. which it would likely be scheduled that way anyways. But I guess let's talk about, does anyone have any questions about the need or the actual charge? And then we'll go to membership.
I still, if we had one voting member and one ex officio, would it be more of like a working group or an ad hoc, not so much a subcommittee?
I'm a firm belief that we need to make these decisions are critical, like the HVAC we keep hearing about in particular. I think we'd want that in the public eyes and not in like a working group.
So you think the HVAC is part of this discussion, the sustainability discussion?
I do, unless someone from the Skanska or Aerostreet team disagrees.
Yeah, I mean, the building systems themselves are so intertwined with the sustainability measures that ultimately, yes, it'll be sustainability, HVAC, you know, it just touches so many different things. So, yes.
And the work needs to be done by what point?
So I think setting the goals by the end of feasibility as we go through this, you know, gathering the information as far as what, you know, what features we want in the building. That'll carry through feasibility. And then when we get into detailed design, you know, once we get past the vote, then, you know, we'll continue to have those discussions. So.
Yeah, I would just add to that during schematic design, we also need to make a lot of decisions about what sustainable features we're interested in and how those impact the systems.
But I think that's
Larry, can you give us just one concrete example of what you just said to make it real?
Sure. For instance, if you decided whether or not you wanted geothermal wells. And so that has a big project impact in terms of capital costs. There are various incentives available to the school should you decide to go that route. So you'd want to pay attention to those. And ultimately, you'd want that in your budget or out of your budget, depending on which way you'd want at the end of schematic design.
Most of those incentives are for taxable entities, but whatever. Okay, so that's a very good example. I get that one. But don't you need to know that before you come to us in July, 1st of August with the projected estimated cost of all of the choices? Don't you really need to have that kind of nailed down, given how expensive that is?
In that particular instance, we'll probably carry it as a add alternate or as a deduct alternate, just to give you a sense of the pricing on the very first round of estimating that we'll do.
Okay.
Other comments on, go ahead, Denise.
So let me ask a question. If this is, will these decisions then be brought back to the full Neary Building Committee?
Yes, that was specific in the charge. Yep.
Right, so wouldn't Andrew's idea of a committee, sort of an ad hoc committee to bring back to the full committee, would that not work? Because we have people who are really skilled in that area, where I can tell you that I'm not. And if we did it in a sort of a non-formal way, it's still going to come to the Neary Building Committee for ratification, correct? Would that be acceptable?
I think, I don't know why we're trying to skirt an open meeting on this. It's just my 2 cents.
Well, the working group we have is working well, so I'm kind of with Denise on this one as far as trying to make it easier.
Well, maybe not for this one because it's so big, but like, you know, I kind of feel like you kind of give everybody, you know, okay, you're responsible for the exterior, you're an interior, you're whatever. You pair them up with a non-voting member, and you know they work and they dig into it, like kind of like liaisons, like we use for the budget, right? They dig into it more than others, and we spread the work out, and then they bring back their findings to this committee and help explain it. And you know, it just if we have a 3 voting member subcommittee for each one of these things, we're all gonna be on, 2 or 3 subcommittees.
But I would imagine the work flexes over time, right? Like whenever we get to security, that will flex up and down based on like a short duration time period.
Mhm.
Versus the working group's not, the working group is really just framing an agenda. So I view it as like an agenda setting meeting for the full Neary Building Committee, as opposed to here, I imagine there's gonna be details presented, and alternatives presented that the group may have to vote on, right? Of what they're gonna bring forward. And we have at least 2 members that I think are interested and B qualified to do this.
Mhm.
That's where I'm getting a little hung up is I think we should just do a 2-member subcommittee if no one else wants to be on it, plus the school administration team member, and see how it works. We have the ability to disband things at any point in time, as well, right? We don't have to go and get permission to do any of this.
Jason, it seems like, I'm sorry, I didn't put my hand up.
Go ahead.
So it seems like, if Chris and Mark are on this committee and we want, it seems like we're looking for, it doesn't, I'm not speaking for everyone, but I don't know that anyone else has that kind of expertise on this
Mhm.
building committee. So sounds like we're looking for a third person to join Mark and Chris on this, and I would do that. To make it a 3-person committee, so you don't end up failing to be able to have committee meetings, but I have to probably, I'd want to hear if Mark thinks that, if Mark thinks that's a good idea, and or Chris thinks that's a good idea, but I'd volunteer to be the third wheel, although I'm a pretty small wheel in that group.
I personally think if you have the time, it's a great idea, especially given the role that you represent in this committee, representing the school committee, and the fact that wellness is such a huge part of this as well, right? And I think that will drive a lot of policy decisions by the school administration as well. So I'm certainly in
How do
support
we
of
know
it.
Chris wants to do this? Does he have the time to do it?
I asked him when I knew he was going to be late, and he said he'd be very interested if the committee was willing.
Well, I've been looking forward to his input into HVAC stuff, given a couple of the situations we've had with previous projects here with HVAC. So I agree, it's a perfect one for him. I just want to make sure he agrees.
He has confirmed he's willing to support.
And Mark,
Okay.
we kind of nominated you too. Are you okay?
I'm fine. Yep.
Okay. And then Greg, Steve Mucci is going to be your school administration team member that you're recommending.
We changed. It's going to be Keith Lavoy.
Okay. Welcome, Keith, pending a vote.
Oh,
Okay.
wait, I didn't know that before I volunteered. Um,
All right.
Guess the die is cast.
I am going to move that the Neary Building Committee adopt the Sustainability Subcommittee charge and appoint Chris Evers, Mark Davis, and Roger Challen as voting members, and Keith Lavoy as non-voting members. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right. Roll call vote. Roger,
Aye.
Denise,
Aye.
Mark D,
Aye.
Kathy, Andrew,
Aye.
and I am aye as well. So that is unanimous. Thank you all for that. Next item on the agenda is our OPM and designer updates. So Jim, who is going to need screen sharing privileges for this?
So I have it pulled up, so you can give it to me.
Okay. And we have I'll just read off the items at least you all gave me, but I think I'll just hand the keys to you to kind of run through the presentation and just ask members to put their hand up as they have questions or want to stop. So we're going to discuss the executive summary of existing conditions and base repair. We're going to get a summary of the educational planning outcomes, and we're going to review the MSBA space summaries. And obviously all this should and will be explained by the team as we go forward. So with that, Jim, I'll hand it to you and the team.
All right. Yeah, so a lot of what's in our typical update, we're going to touch on the existing condition summary that happened over February break. Obviously, the building performance, and then we're starting to work through the options and space summaries that we'll also touch on. Over the next 30 days, we are really going to dive deep into the options. That's the biggest charge because we are a month and a half out from our first submittal to the MSBA. So that's going to be the big push over the next 30 days. Then we have the community forum on the 11th. So again, we touch on a lot of this with Arrow Street's piece of it, but that is what we have been doing over the last 30 days. No big updates on the budget. We still have a balance of uncommitted costs of 7,182. We got our first ProPay progress payment back from the MSBA, and those are continuing to be submitted. So anything on the overall update before we turn it over to Arrow Street?
Seeing none.
All right, Larry, Katie?
Yeah, so the existing conditions, one of the things within the PDP and that we are charged with is to document the condition of the existing building and the site. So our team, we have all of our various consultants, all of our experts came out to the site. Most of them came out a few weeks ago. There are a couple upcoming, but they took a look at the site itself and the building. What you're seeing here, the things that they're looking for the condition of the building relate to program deficiencies of the building itself, and that means how they're going to use the spaces as is defined by the ed program. There are certain spaces that maybe don't meet the educational needs currently, so we're trying to figure out which spaces are deficient. We're looking at accessibility, so all of the door clearances and curb cuts and things like that around the site, bathrooms, things like that. And then looking at the building systems, so HVAC, lighting, things like the smoke and fire protection systems. And then also looking at the building envelope, at part of a base repair or any upgrades to the building would be bringing them up to code, and the current code is more stringent, far more stringent than what the building was built under. So those are the sort of things that our consultants were looking at. All of this is going to be summarized in the PDP. Each one will have a separate section describing the current conditions of the building. And then coming up on the April break, we have our geoenvironmental team coming out. We've talked with your team there about doing a few borings on the site. We're focusing on the area where we have identified that the future building would likely be, which is effectively over by the softball field. So we've found a couple spots that won't impact, you'll still be able to play on the field, and they shouldn't have any impact to the day-to-day activities, especially doing it during the vacation week. And then looking at the building itself, there are also some monitors located on the site for traffic, looking at sort of the vehicular aspects of the site. So that is what they have already done and what's ongoing. Any questions on that?
Only on Neary, correct, Katie?
Correct.
Nothing, no Woodward at all.
That's correct. We're only looking at the Neary site. As far as the building, all of these assessments that we're talking about are only on Neary. What we have to look at on Woodward is going to be purely based on the documents that we have.
Is there any condition survey for like soil for wastewater?
You mean drainage?
No, more septic.
Our civil engineers will be looking at the septic system, if that's what you're talking about, the leach field.
Well, I think it's, there's an existing septic system. And
Mhm.
we're looking at expanding the school, right, which would then trigger probably, again, I'm not the sanitarian, but it would trigger, bringing that current system up to code, and whether or not we have enough space, and whether or not we need to do perk testing in other locations, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it would be good to know that we have a good perk test and a, general idea on how we might design a system before we decide how big of a school we can build.
Right, they're gonna look at the existing system and talk about the capacity of that, because I think that's what you're getting at. What capacity does it have right now? And then as we're studying the other options, we would be looking at where potentially a new system could be relocated to. Because yes, where the area that we're talking about building on is where that existing leaching field is. So it
Yeah.
would have to be relocated. And that would be part of the design.
And we're getting closer and closer to the wetlands, so it's more and more
Yes.
difficult to find decent
Right.
safe soil. So that was a concern I think we all have.
Part of our site evaluation will, yes, lay out where the wetlands are and what area we're allowed to build in according to all of those restrictions. Any other? Actually, do you want to, yeah, Jim, thank you. Go into the next slide. That was actually talking about the site, and some of the things that Andrew was bringing up are shown on here. You're seeing a little bit of the wetlands that's off the top of the page. This was just to show the existing site, and actually, if you can point to above the building, right where the softball field is, that's effectively what we're talking about, where we'd be built, having the geotechnical borings taking place.
And if you put it there, where would your leaching field be? Where the current school is?
Likely, that would be part of we'd lay out the whole site, be part of the phasing diagram, because we'd need to take that offline, if we were building on that site. So it's something that we would figure out and study as we're going forward. But we would find a new effective home for it.
Could also be under the existing parking lot. One of the tricky parts, if we go down this road, is you have to relocate it before you start construction of the new building, or a substantial addition towards that direction. So we'd have to work that through, but that's all part of detailed design.
Jim, you want to go to the next slide? So this, we were just showing one of the, let's see, a few of the options that we need to look at. I think it's 5 of them, are about what could be built on the Woodward site. Skanska's team just found today for us the deed related to the use of the field. So that is a useful piece of information for us as far as what part of the site we'd be able to build on. It effectively limits it to just immediately around the Woodward building, which, as you can see, if you cut that site effectively in half, you don't have much buildable area left.
So you've confirmed that Choate Field is restricted to being Choate Field.
That's correct. The deed that Jessica was able to get a hold of, thank you very much, Jessica, basically says that it's plot A, and we have the deed that lays out the boundary of the field itself, says is to only be used for playgrounds. And there's a whole list of restrictions about maintaining the site and that sort of thing, but it's very clear that it's only to be used for a playground.
So, Katie, is it still too early then to decide whether Woodward is out as far as adding a grade? And you still got more to do
We have to play it out for the PDP. All of the 12 options that the MSBA laid out, we just have to give a full description. That will be an integral part of that scenario, and saying why we think it's not feasible. If that's, we still need to diagram out how something else would fit on the site with the appropriate square footage, and where it would sit and what it would do to parking and that. So we're required to play that out for the MSBA. But I think it's pretty intuitive that there's not much space on the site. And this is one of the newer buildings. It doesn't seem that you would want to, demolish any, large portion of it or anything like that. It's a newer building. Any other questions before we talk about enrollment options? So part of the, part of the ed planning process that has gone through we have Mike Perillo is going to talk to us in a few minutes about some of the outcomes of all of the ed planning. But one of the aspects of that is defining the specific spaces that are unique to your building, or so the MSBA spreadsheet or template has a lot of the typical spaces, but then you have to put in some of the more unique spaces as defined by your educational program. And then we have translated that into the 3 different enrollment options that we're required to study per the statement of interest. And those are what are shown here. And what we're trying to show is the difference in the square footage, the overall gross size of the building for those 3 enrollments. You'll also see on each of the lines, so this is quite an extensive spreadsheet. It's a lot of information to take in if we were to show you the whole thing. So what we've done is summarized each of the different areas, classifications of spaces. So things like the core academics, you'll see that in the number of, I can't read it on my screen, number of rooms, I believe is the next heading. Yes, number of classrooms is the way it's described. But if you'll see the first column tells you the number of classrooms is 13. The second scenario is 20. And then the 610 is 28. So we're just trying to show you what's growing in each of these scenarios that's sort of driving these different square footages. This is a quick snapshot of where we are right now. We're going to this will continue to be tweaked and evolved according to the ed plan and the information that we get back and forth between our team and Greg and his team.
Katie, I'm surprised the health and physical education size doesn't really change.
The MSBA prescribes a certain size, and I think there's a tipping point where it becomes a little bit larger. I don't know what enrollment that is, where you might actually get a little bit more space. But there's sort of, it's not that you don't get, it's not like getting 5 square feet per kid where you
Yeah.
notch up each way. It's sort of like once you hit this point, then you get a whole section again. Larry,
Yeah,
do
it was
you
just
a better way to describe that?
yeah, which makes sense for the first 2, but going from basically doubling the size and having no additional gym space, right? I mean, it seems.
Yeah, we've certainly talked about that with the educational team. But to Katie's point, a gym which is about 6,200 square feet or so, there is the working assumption at the moment is that would work whether you have 300 students or 600 students. If we begin to look at adding capacity there, then that would go up. If we say, well, 600 is just too many to try and schedule. And likely that would be something that the MSBA is probably going to say they would not participate in, but we would cross that bridge as we get there.
You'll also see, sort of, Andrew, to your point, that things like the special ed, there are 3 classrooms in the first 2 scenarios, but then there are 5 in the next one, and that's directly related to the number of students and how you'd be scheduling those classrooms. Similar with the art and music. So this is really just meant to give you a capture of what the different scenarios are, what it means. We'll continue to show you this in this format as things evolve. Any other questions about potential enrollments and what it means for the square footage of the building? So this was just a recap of the building performance. We talked about it a little bit before. I thought it was useful to put in these 10 measures again so that everybody could see, you know, what was in each category and what was considered. And then you'll see on the next slide, we took all of the responses and put them into a word cloud. So the words that are the largest in scale here are the ones that were the highest responses. So clearly, energy is of prime importance when we're talking about building performance, specifically for this group. And wellness obviously is another key factor. And then, you know, a few others. There are actually only 7 of the 10 represented here. I realized as we were putting this together that not all 10 were chosen. So these are really the high points of what we'll be looking at as we're reviewing the building performance and talking about it with this subcommittee that we were talking about earlier. And Mike is going to talk about some of the outcomes from the ed planning exercises.
Thanks, Katie. So hi everybody. We had a great series of visioning sessions and programming meetings over the past few months. We met with over 40 plus participants, ranging from community members, public officials, even policemen, firemen. They were sitting next to community members, teachers, parents, which was really great to get this big, wide range of what the educational vision is for the community and the district. So what I'm going to show you is a series of outcomes, starting with these overarching goals and priorities. We started with a prioritization exercise and asked people what mattered most and what was at the heart of the projects. And so you can see these were what rose to the top. So students and teachers at the heart of the school and at the project. Lots of spaces and instructional practices to really support innovation in education. No matter what enrollment design and building design we go with, really supporting that climate of belonging and community and connection and supporting students' well-being. Having flexible, adaptable spaces as well. Opportunities for outdoor and indoor connections. A building that's academically, financially, and environmentally sustainable. And then also long-term adaptability and a logical, efficient building. So really providing that built-in flexibility so that the building can really grow with the changes of education over time. So we had a total of 3 visioning sessions. We had 1 full day visioning session, and then we had 2 3-hour visioning sessions. We also had 2 programming meetings that were 3 hours each. We went on school tours to see precedent school environments, brand new schools in the Commonwealth. And then we also toured your existing schools. All of that work culminated in these programming meetings. And so the next series of slides that you're going to see were actual outcomes and slides that were presented in those meetings. So anything on the left-hand side, you see there are questions. Those were the questions participants responded to. And then the outcomes that are starting to really inform the educational program that the district's now working on with me. Those are all of the things that are in gray on the right side. So we started talking about academic organization. How is the building best organized to really support students at the core, to embed special education and make it really inclusive? And so what came out of that was this idea of the building being organized into learning neighborhoods, meaning pods around the building would support potentially a whole grade level or multiple grade levels together. But it's really a collection of various size spaces. So that way students can kind of be in that pod for most of the day and have opportunities to be in a classroom, in a breakout space. Teacher planning is associated with each neighborhood. So it really breaks the scale of the building down and creates this small community within a much larger school. Small group rooms are going to be between every pairs of classrooms. That's a small, like 150 square foot space that can really accommodate 4 to 6 students. They can either, go into that space from classrooms or specialists that are supporting kids and providing interventions. They can meet students there so that interventions are really handled on team. And then each learning neighborhood will also have what's called a learning commons. And really that's just a shared breakout space to provide breakout and flexibility as well. And then we're providing STEAM space, we're a language classrooms and a health classroom as well. So here's an example of what a learning commons would look like. This is actually from the Hanlon Elementary School or Pine Hill Elementary School now in Westwood that just opened up. And this was an example that we looked at and studied and talked about. And it's this idea of kids being able to spill out into the space academically and collaborate, do different activities. Maybe science is even held out in this space. And so each grade level or learning community would have this shared type of space. The next category we talked about was special education and student support services. So we talked at length about the full breadth of special education programming in Southborough, but we also talked about how can we bring services as close to students as possible to minimize travel distance and to really support inclusivity. So what came out of that was dedicated space for the therapeutic learning program and for your castle program, and also dedicated rooms to support services like reading and math intervention, English language development, OT, PT. And the majority of those spaces, not only are they evenly dispersed throughout the building to really support that close distance to students, but a number of them are also either embedded in a learning community or just kind of on the edge of a learning community. So that way students can access those without going very far, and their service mostly on team. The next category, you can go ahead, is social emotional supports. A number of students, especially at the elementary level, vary developmentally, but also vary in their different social emotional needs and supports as well. So we had conversations about how can we provide various sensory opportunities for kids? How can we create opportunities for them to take a breath throughout the day? So that they don't get to a very heightened state and they don't necessarily need those kind of old-fashioned calming rooms. Instead, sensory experiences and just moments to take a breath are really scattered throughout the building. So what came out of visioning was even having opportunities in the cafeteria to provide sensory-friendly alternative versions of that. So students who might want a quieter lunch or lunch bunch groups that are meeting with an adjustment counselor, they can go to areas like that are still visually connected to the big cafeteria, but it's just quieter for students looking for a different opportunity. Go ahead to the next picture. So here's an image of what that might look like as well. So again, this is the Pine Hill Elementary School in Westwood, and you can see kiddos sitting outside just of the cafeteria, but because there's glass, you can see into the cafeteria, so they kind of feel like they're still a part of it, but it's just a different opportunity for them to kind of dip their toe into the cafeteria, eat there, have a little bit of an acoustic difference, but be among their peers as well. The next category was looking at media, library media, and STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, art, and math. So we talked about where does STEAM fit into overall programming, how is media and STEAM related. In lots of schools now across the country and all over the world, you see this interdisciplinary opportunity between what library used to be, what STEAM and technology and engineering is, and what art is. So what came out of visioning was this idea of how can we have science, technology, engineering, art, math, spaces and media spaces all really connected to allow for flexibility over time. You can go to the next page. So one of the examples we looked at in the visioning sessions was this floor plan on the left, where you have media in the center in the academic area of the building, and then you have art and technology flanking it with some opportunity to spill out from art and technology into media and vice versa. So really those programs are connected spatially, but then also experientially as well. The next category we talked about was administration and guidance. The idea of, if the building is a bit bigger, how do we, in the largest enrollment, how do we support opportunities for administrators and adjustment counselors and, other folks to be a bit dispersed throughout the building to really be in the mix in the day-to-day experience with students. And so one of the things we're still talking about that'll get refined as we go is, how do we bring some of those student supports as close to students as possible? And then one more. Finally, we talked about community spaces, athletics, performance spaces. We heard all about the robust music program that currently is in place and how, there needs to be spaces to support music, chorus, and orchestra. An outcome was that the stage would be associated with the cafeteria and that we should consider some type of auditorium space as well to have a more legitimate performance space and also space for community use. A slightly larger gym space to include spectator seating, and then also space to support the extended day program as well. And then I think that, oh, yep, and here's an image. When we went to school tours, we went to see a total of 4 schools, and this was one of the schools. It was an Arrow Street project. And here the stage is associated with the gym, but you can see on the left there's some built-in spectator seating as well. So that was a lot of information in a short amount of time. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer anything you have about the ed program.
Yes, before taking questions, I wanted to give Greg and his team any chance to comment on, given they were at the heart of this whole process with Mike and the team, any comments they wanted to add before we go to the committee.
No comments.
Okay. Kathy?
So this is an easy one, Larry. Is the extended day space reimbursable?
Extended day. I don't believe it is, but I want to check on that.
That's for an office and storage, Kathy.
Right.
Say that again, Greg?
So that would be not a space for extended day, but just for an office space and storage space for extended day staff and then their belongings. But they would use most likely the cafeteria or the gymnasium or a classroom space that already exists.
Okay.
Other questions or comments for Mike? Mike, I know it was a ton of work, ton of coordination. So thanks to you and the team for the effort to date. I know there's obviously a lot more to go, but I appreciate kind of everything, at least I was able to see from my in and out at various points in the process. And I think a huge kudos go out to the school administration team that goes well beyond the members that are on this committee for the amount of time that they had to dedicate in addition to their day jobs to get us to where we're at this point and be on track for the deliverables.
Yeah, thank you. I would say honestly, kudos right back at you guys because it's sometimes because life is so busy that, there isn't as much involvement, and there was an incredible amount of involvement. Even involvement on writing the ed program now, there's a ton of people in this shared Google Doc, and the level of specificity is really great. So I'm excited to see where this goes.
Andrew, go ahead.
Just one question. When I was looking at the gym, it looked like it was probably more than the 6,000 square feet. Have we assessed any of these kind of goals against kind of what do we have for square footage for them?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in on that. So the gym you saw the picture of is a little bit larger. That's a middle school sized gym. And that was done because the folks in Harvard wanted a second place for the middle schoolers to play. And as folks are starting to learn now, that means portion of that was not reimbursed by the MSBA. It also had a little space for spectator seating. Right now we're working with sort of a standard size elementary school gym. And I think if I remember correctly, the sort of additional space we're now carrying under the special needs,
The
uh,
adaptive PE.
yes, adaptive PE, which gives you a little more space for, physical activity, but because it's in the special education, we think there's a better chance that the MSBA might actually participate in that one.
Kathy?
So, Kathleen, Valentia, are you getting excited? Look, I mean, this is pretty impressive. So, can you do what you just showed with a renovation? Or what you're showing really is a new school?
It could
Well-
be part of sorry.
Go ahead,
Larry,
Katie.
cut you off there. Depending on which enrollment we're talking about, some of it is going to be an add reno, and the part of the building that's added could be the new gym. And that would mean taking this space that's currently the gym and repurposing it into some of these other spaces. Maybe it becomes better music rooms or something along those lines. And then the new portion of the building could be the gym. So that's
That-
one scenario.
And that's part of the whole feasibility process, is to understand truly what the ed program needs to be, and then weigh these options based on how well, partially when you're assessing the options, how well it supports the educational program as intended or envisioned.
Okay, but if it stays a 2-grade school like it is now, so there is no addition to speak of, can you do what you just showed with just a renovation?
I would
As-
guess we're going to be tight.
Are you asking about the space specifically or the finishes and that? Because it would be
Everything. I mean, it looks to me like you just
It-
literally would gut the whole thing if you were trying, I mean,
It should be pointed out. I think Kathy, we had talked about this a little bit last week. That if you're looking at just the base repair option, which is just bringing the school up to code and replacing finishes, etc., we're not actually changing the space or adding space. The addition renovation, we have the opportunity to add more space to the program needs, and that even if it is just still 2 grades, but yeah, it's important to remember that the renovation, which we're calling base repair, doesn't add extra space.
so that's sort of what I was asking. The gym itself would remain the same size, but it would be refreshed and have new equipment and those sort of things. If you're asking about the size of the gym getting bigger, that would likely not work in the base repair because it's the size that it is.
all right, I don't want to say much more other than, to me, base repair doesn't mean to refurbish the gym. It means to repair things. So in my mind, it was more, I really meant renovation when I said the same 2 grades, not just base repair, but it sounds like this is just a different terminology. To me, repair is not truly gutting it and making it look like what we just saw.
Greg?
I don't think we would be able to achieve the programming goals with just a base repair, Kathy.
That tends to be my sense, and I'm not sure. Katie, do you remember how many square feet are in the existing building, or Andy?
68,000, I believe, somewhere in there.
I think if I remember the number we just put up, where the sort of 2-grade
76.
scheme is 78, 76.
Yep.
So in that scenario, we had to add at least 8 to 10,000 square feet to meet the programmed requirements. And we could add that in a number of different ways. As Katie mentioned earlier, we could add it as a gym, we could add it as cafeteria, we could add it as classrooms. I think one of the questions that we need to sort out is what happens to the district offices in our studies? In the
I
base
think,
repair.
Larry, I'm just going to cut you off there. I think Greg has been very clear that that would not be part of the scope. Greg,
So they're-
please. So
They're moving out
We would move out.
under the base repair scheme, so we would reclaim those classrooms. Okay,
Correct.
okay.
So Greg, have you just decided you're moving out, period? No.
That is our intention. regardless of what alternate is decided as the best option.
And I think it's important to note that none of that would be reimbursable. So any money that's spent on that space would not be reimbursable.
Correct.
If it were superintendents, if it were a.
Administration, right? If that gets repurposed to classroom, I think it's totally different, or educational space. Be a
I
very
could
different
become
story.
a teaching principal or teaching superintendent.
There you go. We gotta be creative here.
All right. Arrow Street team, anything else? Oh, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick comment. When we looked at the square footage page with the 3 scenarios, at the bottom was the non-educational space, which I assume is not reimbursable. Am I correct?
You're talking about the non-program spaces?
Correct.
That's part of the overall, the MSBA, you take the net from all of the other spaces and they have a multiplier and then that's incorporated.
Okay.
So as long as you don't go over their multiplier.
Okay.
So that with that caveat.
In some of the renderings that we saw, it appears one of the benefits of doing this would be to make circulation part of your educational program, because you're incorporating educational spaces in areas where kids normally would have to get from one class to another. In other words, those long, dark hallways kind of disappear. Does that have an impact on that bottom number? Does that suddenly reduce because we're using that space for educational purposes?
We'd likely use some of the numbers for circulation because you are required to have an egress path.
Right, you have the stairs and
Right,
dedicated
and a
areas.
clear
out.
path through it. And then the remaining space is what we were describing in the ed plan as the neighborhood spaces. I believe we called them, it wasn't breakout, Mike, it was
Learning commons.
learning commons, yes. So it does have an educational purpose. So we're trying to describe a learning space that's just coexisting with that corridor. So
Okay.
there's a little bit of you're allotting for that space under 2 different line items.
Okay. Yep, it was just a good thing I noticed, saying, oh, this is creative. We're getting away from those long, dark corridors with lockers on one side, and good God, I'll date myself, the little water, not bubblers on the other side that you can get a drink of water that never worked right. So no, good.
Kathy?
So just to be clear, to kind of piggyback what Mark was alluding to, those 3 permutations, the 76, the 95, and the 122, you believe those are all reimbursable spaces?
What is shown in here, I believe there might be a few, let's see, there were a few unique spaces. There's the adaptive PE is actually part of the PE space. Sorry. At one point we had talked about there perhaps being a multi-purpose space, like a partial gym that would not have been included. But I think the adaptive PE is the way that we've described it now, which should be included in that space.
Yeah,
So
because
is that
that's
is that a
special
yes?
education.
Is that a yes,
Right.
Katie?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
because it's a special education, it's within the special education category, it's likely that the MSBA reimburses special education program areas.
Okay, so the way you've got the 3 columns, you believe that the MSBA is likely to reimburse for the whole thing.
Kathy, there is, I believe, Katie, correct me if I'm wrong, an auditorium in each of the 3 scenarios, all 1,
And
3.
right, and the auditorium would not be reimbursed.
Is that it, we think?
It's the only one that I can think of right now off the top of my head. Again, we'll be showing this to you again, and refining these descriptions, but that's the one that comes to mind. The auditorium is specifically not reimbursed. Depending on some of the descriptions of some of the other spaces, it's up to the MSBA will have, they will review it and they will align it with the ed plan, and they may push back on some of the spaces, but I think, you know, our experience in describing them, and the way that Mike and Greg and his team are working together and dovetailing it to the educational plan, you know, that's the way to reinforce the need for these spaces and to justify it with the MSBA. But ultimately, they have the final say.
Go ahead, Denise.
So the picture that you showed us of the gym, which had the stage off to the right, you know, would that entirely be reimbursable because it really isn't a gymnasium, but it's got the portion, or would they do a percentage?
They would take the portion that's over what they've allotted. So in this
Okay.
case, I think it was just the extra size of the, you know, the court was slightly larger, like Larry talked about, and then
Mhm.
there's a little bit of additional square foot around the edge where the seating was. So anything
Right.
that's over their number.
The stage is reimbursable if that was part of the question too.
Correct, that
Yeah.
was.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you were talking about the gym space itself.
It's a good way to get it reimbursed.
Yes, the stage is reimbursable.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments on that piece? All right, move to the next part of that.
That was our whole presentation.
That's
Yep.
it for everything. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So I guess can you just give us a preview of what to expect in 2 weeks? I guess it's 3 weeks time.
So in 3 weeks, we would be reviewing some of the options that we've laid out. We're starting to do some diagramming of the different scenarios, very general block diagrams, you know, color coded so you can understand, similar to the way that we did the exercise all together at our last session, but starting to lay out what the different enrollments would look like.
And then for purposes of the open forum next Thursday night, what are you thinking in terms of anything that you may be able to show or think would be of interest to community in any way, shape, or form on this? Or you think we're really talking about some of the stuff the committee saw, you know, a couple weeks ago in terms of these are the options, this is what we're still analyzing, just so the committee can react to how we approach that forum.
I think we were planning to give a general overview of the timeline and the project. There are going to be people who attend who know nothing about it. And they're going to want to know, you know, when is this going to be built? Those sort of really broad understanding about the project. And then a recap of the ed planning sessions, just to say, here's what we've heard you say so far. We can give a quick snapshot, as we have here, about the different enrollments, just to give an idea of the size of the building, because that's obviously going to be a question people are going to ask, as well as, you know, what scenarios do you have to play out. So describing the MSBA's requirement to look at the 12 different scenarios, we can, that matrix is a little hard to follow, but we can give a quick snapshot of that so that people understand that these are, you know, we're required to study each of these different options so that we know what's viable and what's not, and that we've looked at everything. We want to make sure there's sort of no stone unturned. And then we want to hear from them. We want to hear what things would be very important for your community, for the school itself, and for other uses within the community. So we're really hoping that people will come out and engage and talk about how everybody can enjoy this new building.
Okay. Kathy, I see your hand up.
So Katie, the number one question by far from at least the parent group that hopefully will be there is whether a school is going to get closed or not, what the grade and what the grade configuration is going to be, and how you're going to build it and not upset the school year. We've gone through this with our high school 20 years ago. So parents aware of what can happen when you do this. So that's number one. Number two, you're going to hear probably from, again, depending on who asks, if you've got a, say, senior group that tries to come, they'll want to know what the cost is going to be. So that to me is by far your two biggest questions to expect.
That's really helpful to know.
And you don't, of course, you don't have the answers to those two yet. So anyway, hopefully there are some more that you do have answers to.
But I think
And-
understanding the process, I mean, that's really what we're hoping to get out of it, is so that there's, you know, demystify a little bit about what it takes and at what points people have input, being able to answer their questions ahead of time. And we really do want the input of the community to know how they're going to use this building, right? And what, you know, what spaces they'll be able to use, or there's still going to be fields. There's always a lot of conversation about, you know, the softball field is getting disrupted. Where is that going to go? So some things like that, just to try and get more people engaged with the project.
Okay. Final chance for questions for this team. All right. Appreciate all the details. We have a few agenda items left that I'm going to try to run through quickly here. Subcommittee updates. Kathy, anything on finance?
Nothing since we only met last week. So
No.
I don't, we haven't met yet. So no, I would only repeat what I said last week. So no.
Okay. All right. And I will quickly go communicate through communications. So after this meeting, the communications subcommittee is meeting to sign off on our first list of frequently asked questions that will get posted on the website. The website is ready to go, subject to a little bit of content being uploaded by our school administration team. I will send a link out as soon as it is live. And I think I will add a way to give us feedback as well as it proceeds. And then we will continue to adopt and adapt to that as we go. The subcommittee has outlined protocols for uploading data. Right now, it's really going to be content that's already been discussed in a full Neary Building Committee meeting and summarizing facts, absent the frequently asked questions, which obviously do have some more to them. We have been compiling questions as well that are not ready for prime time, that we're going to keep in a parking lot so that we are ready to kind of react to those as the plans come back together. Some are very policy driven, some are very much related to the project, and obviously those two are going to have to meet. By policy driven, I just mean a lot of questions about school operations, how schools would function under certain enrollment scenarios, and a lot of things that kind of have to have direction on where we're headed to drive some of that. So questions on that before I go to talking about the survey results. Greg was nice enough to put together a summary of in graph form and a brief memo of what the initial survey that had over 300 respondents said. That was in your packet. I don't know if anyone had any questions, comments, or observations beyond what was there, but very much appreciate the summary of that. And I'm sure it'll be interesting if we ask the same questions again in a certain amount of time. I'm just going to throw a number, 3 months time, to kind of trend some of this too, as people become more and more aware of the project and more aware of the particulars. And of course, everyone's favorite question, the cost, as that becomes, a little clearer. So I'll pause and see if there's any comments or questions on that summary. All right. Seeing none, is there any public comment? All right. On meeting schedule then, I will post a meeting for next Thursday night, the 11th, to the extent we have a quorum there. That is live at 7 o'clock at Trotter in the auditorium. And then our next full full committee meeting via Zoom is the 22nd, and we will be pushing our time back to 7:30 p.m. To accommodate some of the athletic events and sports that are starting to come up that are causing us to not have a quorum potentially right at 7. Go ahead, Greg. You're on mute.
The 22nd is also the Northborough Town meeting, so Becky and I will not be in attendance to the Neary Building Committee.
Okay. And I did just realize it's also, I believe, it looks like it's the start of Passover, or someone's gonna have to keep me. I just want to make sure that that's also not a concern for anyone. If you do, you don't have to raise it here, just let me know. But I imagine we've already gotten kind of a preview of the agenda. So you'll be missed, Greg and Becky, and good luck. All right.
Basically, is the working group meeting this Thursday?
I'm looking at my calendar. I don't see anything on there. It looks like it's the 11th.
I thought there was.
I've got it on for both 4th and 11th, and it didn't look right.
Thought I saw something come out from Jim.
So
Yeah, for the just the 11th,
Okay.
just before the forum.
okay. There any other business before the committee? All right, so before I make my motion to adjourn, those that are on the communications subcommittee, you have a separate link for that meeting. This link will close out and stop. All right, so I will make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Kathy,
Aye.
Denise,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
Roger,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
and Jason is aye as well. Did I miss anyone? All right. Have a good evening, everyone.
Night, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.